Do you know that feeling when you just know you have a great new idea? Your idea is the next step. Your new idea is an opportunity to move things and positively disrupt the system. Do you know that feeling when you just know you have a great new idea? Your idea is the next step. And you know you just moved beyond just thinking outside of the box. You have moved to boxless thinking. And you're confident. Your new idea is an opportunity to move things and positively disrupt the system. But here's the thing. What if it's not about the next big thing? What if the real opportunity in front of us is understanding what just happened? Now, I imagine that we've all created something new and had our great new ideas produce successful results. But at some point, even with the best of planning, we've all experienced the reality of failure. Now, given the fact that failure is normal, how often do we really talk about it? Now, let's have a show of hands. Who has recently attended a workshop or a session that was entitled something like Youth Engagement Strategies That Didn't Work? Show of hands. Okay, seeing just a few, and I'm not surprised because most often we look for models and we promote models that demonstrate success and best practices. But here's the thing. Talking about what didn't work can be just as important as talking about what did work. Okay. Now, John Kennedy once said that success has 1,000 fathers, but failure is an orphan. So what if we took time to document when things don't work? And I mean, really take a look at patterns. Try to understand what were the real barriers. What if we took time to actually document this in a way that we were sharing it more broadly, not only internally with our organizations, but also in the field? Now, let's have a show of hands again. How many individuals are part of an organization that has a strategic plan or a blueprint that outlines your goals and your course of action? Show of hands. Just about everybody in the room. Now, studies have shown that 2/3 of small and large organizations do not effectively implement the activities they have outlined in their strategic plan. So one more time, let's have a show of hands. How many of you work with organizations that have a failure protocol, an actual failure map? And by that I mean documentation, an in-place process where you're doing a deep dive look in terms of what didn't work and actually having that for discussion and review for the projects that didn't quite hit the mark. Show of hands. I saw at least one. Okay, far few hands go up here. And I'm not surprised. But why is that? So often we know that when we fail, it's because we're trying to stretch and do something special. The reality is sometimes the more spectacular the failure, the more deliberately innovative we were trying to be with our activities. And we all know that talking about failure is hard. The reality of the fear of judgment, there's the fear of the business consequences, and we just know that talking about failure makes you vulnerable. But the reality is that so often when we fail, and being the optimist that we are, we try to move on. We think about what are the next steps so that we're successful with the next project. We do try to take some lessons learned, so we keep those in mind moving forward. But if we don't fully examine what happens in the problem space, we run the risk of not actually being able to achieve future results and impact. So the problem space is where we stay rooted in the question. It's where we actually determine and understand what's the actual problem we're working on. It's the space where we actually begin to unveil and uncover what are the real unmet needs of our target audience. And it's the space we want to stay in before we rush to find the new answers or the new best thing in terms of solutions. So let me share a story with you. Back in 1957, there were two engineers, Al Fielding and Mark Chavan, and they created what they thought was going to be the new best thing in interior design. Their product was a high-end textured wallpaper. And that item, what you see here, is actually what we know today as bubble wrap. So the idea of covering your walls with something that popped with fun just didn't take off. So a later attempt, they tried to market it as greenhouse insulation. And unfortunately, that was a flop too. But in time, they actually found an unmet need. They connected with the folks at IBM who were trying to figure out the best way to transport their newly launched computers. And with that, the not-so-popular wallpaper became an overnight success. Now, I hope this story can shed light on two important dynamics. One, the reality of the importance of staying in the problem space before we rush to find solutions, because it really does matter. And secondly, the importance and the power of the questions that we choose to ask. We're trying to figure out what new benefit are we really creating and what problem are we really solving. Because maybe if we spend more time figuring out the right questions, we can move faster to project and program success. Now, let's take this example and again, think about this idea of a failure map. This idea of when we have this information, how we can share and use it when we understand what didn't work and why we weren't able to achieve the results we had aimed for. So one of the important things we want to think about with a failure map is keeping it simple. We want to make sure that the information that we're sharing is digestible, because the more digestible it is, the easier it is for people to learn and really stay re-engaged in the problem space. And the other thing is we want to be sure to go deep. We want to understand what were those real barriers that actually prevented us from achieving success. And once we identify them, we want to go deeper. We really want to uncover what happened in a way, and you'd be surprised. You may discover that your target audience, and even sometimes a new key audience, is telling you something that you didn't hear before. And that can change everything. So staying in the problem space, now I'm not going to pretend it's easy, but it's necessary. It's definitely worth the effort. Because if we move too quickly to find the new big idea, the next big solution, we might find ourselves continuing to solve the wrong problem. So let's spend a minute talking about the solution space. Now, this is a space where we're actually implementing programs and services that are actually high in satisfaction for our target audience. We're actually meeting the unmet needs of our target audience, and we're delivering results. So what are some of the opportunities that actually are presented within the solution space? Well, one is reliable data, because data can tell us what went right with a project as well as what went wrong with a project. And sometimes as leaders, one of the most important decisions we have to make is understanding when we should stay the course and when we should change directions. Now, look at this idea of the pivot a little bit more closely. Let's take a page from the startup world. Now, often startups will pivot when they get new information or get new data that allows them to create better insights. And when they have those better insights, sometimes it also helps them to understand something different about their customer. And that understanding also may lead to understanding differences and more effective incentives. Now, did you know in 2005, when YouTube launched, it was actually a dating video site? Do folks know that? Okay, yeah. The slogan was, "Tune in and hook up." Yes. Now, the founders realized fairly quickly that that was not taking off. But they were able to look at data, and they were able to observe how folks were using the site. And that was just to simply share personal videos. So they revamped the site and decided to just focus on personal video sharing. Now, I think you're probably aware that YouTube went on to become a billion-dollar company, and it's estimated that over 35 hours of new content is uploaded every minute. So I think it goes without saying, this idea of moving from hook in and tune in and hook up to actually broadcast yourself was definitely the way to go. And as social innovators, we have the opportunity to pivot successfully as well. If we get our hands on reliable data that actually helps us to see if there's a more effective way to solve a problem or a better solution in terms of repurposing something that we're already doing. But the idea is that the pivot is not just a singular activity. It's an ongoing iterative process. And it requires reliable data, but also trust and relationships, and the ability sometimes to look outside of our organizations and our current partners for more multidirectional collaboration. Now, it's also really important to understand this idea in the sense that having the right data can really take our efforts to the next level and also help us see the entire system that we're operating in. So understanding the different elements in our organizations and how they relate, as well as how elements relate in the coalitions or the collaboratives that we participate in. And we'd be surprised in understanding how that can actually help us adapt and move differently. Now, I'm not going to pretend that this is easy, kind of understanding or weeding through the sea of data, but it's so important because once we have the right data, it can help us in terms of making faster and better decisions, save time as well as effort in what we're doing. So it's important to really think about, how we can get our hands on this data, and sometimes we do have to think about openness. And this goes to the point of thinking about what we can share that we're learning from our organizations. Now, so often, there's data we can't share, but I would encourage that we kind of move our default from opacity to openness. Share what didn't work. Share what we're learning more broadly. Now, it's not just about having the data or collecting the data ourselves from within our organizations. It's also about the story that we can tell with data. So one of the most important and fun things we have now are data visualizations. But the thing with visualizations is that the most important aspect of them is really just encouraging engagement. So let me show a quick example. This is an actual screenshot from one of Measure America's interactive data tools called Data to Go New York City. And this particular screenshot is from a report that we released earlier this year entitled Who Graduates? New Findings on New York City High School Admission and Graduation Rates. And you can see here that the darker areas on the map actually represent the higher actual percentage of young people that are graduating on time. But we can see that there's a real significant gap here. There's a 33.1% gap between the community district with the highest rate of on-time graduation at 92.3%, and those students in what we have here is actually Bronx Community District with the lowest rate of graduation at 59.2%. So the data is really showing us that there's factors that we need to understand and uncover to make sure that all young people, no matter where they live, have a better success rate of graduating on time. So this is just a quick example of seeing what the data is showing us. Now, one of the things that you have to be mindful of course, is that you may not have the capacity to work with the data. But I would encourage that you do what you do best and partner for the rest. There's definitely an interest in co-creation. I know personally it's all about getting the questions from practitioners, understanding what's happening in the field, hearing from community members, as well as from youth. And that really informs so that we have powerful, impactful research that really ensures that we're moving the needle in terms of policy, practice, as well as community action. So we started this journey thinking about, the importance of understanding what just happened. And I hope that we can all rise to the occasion of not just embracing failure, but also using it as an opportunity to document what went wrong and sharing that internally as well as with our colleagues in the field. And yes, this is an extra step, but I think sometimes in order to achieve the results we're all looking for, we have to slow down in order to speed up. Thank you. Do you know that feeling when you just know you have a great new idea? Your idea is the next step. Your new idea is an opportunity to move things and positively disrupt the system.